To study hyponatremia, the most important concept we should understand is that hyponatremia is not a disorder of sodium, it is a disorder of water. So, it is a disorder of water metabolism. This is the most important point we should remember throughout the discussion. And we should also remember that solutes in the blood are responsible for tonicity. Suppose this is a cell membrane and this is a cell. There is a solute A, solute B. If the solute B can pass through the cell membrane easily, it will not exert any tonicity in the blood. Tonicity meaning that the ability of the solute to draw water. So solute B, if it does not, solute A, if it does not cross through the cell membrane, then it will remain in the blood, as a result of which the tonicity of the blood will increase, as a result of which it will draw water from the cell. This type of solutes are called as effective solutes. The example for effective solute is glucose. Now whenever there is effective solute in the blood, what it will do is that it will draw water from the cell, as a result of which water in the blood will be increased, as a result of which the sodium concentration which is measured will be reduced. Sodium in the body is normal, however, there is excess water in the blood, as a result of which when we measure sodium, sodium will be lower. This is called as pseudohyponatremia, that is due to translocation of water from the cell into the blood. This is pseudohyponatremia. Now, whenever there is true hyponatremia, one thing you have to remember that the tonicity of the blood is low. So true hyponatremia means tonicity of the blood low, so true hyponatremia. So from now on, whatever we are discussing will be on true hyponatremia. Before going to hyponatremia proper, we should know something about ADH. Now ADH is antidiuretic hormone, also called as vasopressin or arginine vasopressin, secreted by pituitary, etc., which is not useful. One thing you should remember that in our kidney, there are two types of water reabsorption. One is facultative and obligatory. Okay. Now, what obligatory water reabsorption means that it does not require ADH. So, no ADH is required for obligatory water reabsorption. However, for facultative water reabsorption, ADH is required. So, ADH is necessary for facultative water absorption. So, most of the water is absorbed in the body by facultative. However, there is 20 to 30% of water absorption which occurs in CT is under ADH control. Now, if you see a cell in the PCT, this is the lumen, this is the cell, this is the blood. Okay, now ADH acts on the basolateral membrane on the ADH receptor. Suppose it is V2 receptor in the kidney, okay, which is not important. So what it does is that it increases cyclic AMP and it causes opening of some certain aquaporins. And there is only water absorption, there is no sodium absorption. So whenever there is only water absorption, what happens is this: in the blood, water will be excess of sodium. Okay. Now, when this ADH is secreted, ADH is only secreted when the tonicity, that is blood tonicity increases, then ADH is secreted. That means the patient is dehydrated, as a result of which ADH is secreted. ADH acts on the ADH receptor here and absorbs water so that dehydration is corrected. This is a normal response in our body. Okay. Now, normally our body has certain mechanism by which hyponatremia is prevented. So prevention of hyponatremia in a body is one by water intake. If we keep on taking water, the tonicity of the blood will not rise. As a result, ADH is inhibited. So water intake, that is thirst, causes water intake, which results in ADH to be inhibited. Second thing is that PCT, normal or proximal convoluted tubule, it causes isoosmotic reabsorption of water, as a result of which there is no hyponatremia because it is isoosmotic. Third thing is that DCT and thick ascending loop of Henle. What it does is that it reabsorbs solutes and no water. Okay, these are the mechanism by which hyponatremia is normally prevented. So hyponatremia is possible in three scenarios. Okay, one scenario is that when ADH suppression is normal, that normally thirst which is suppressing ADH is normal, and diluting segment, that is the kidney is also normal. So this is the one scenario during which hyponatremia is possible. Second scenario where it is possible is ADH normal, kidney abnormal. Okay. Now the third scenario where it is possible is that where ADH is increased. Okay. So these are the three scenarios when ADH is present. So when ADH suppression is normal, diluting kidney is normal. This is possible when patient is taking excess of water, that is psychogenic polydipsia. Second scenario where ADH is normal but kidney is abnormal. This could be because when patient is on diuretics or there is CKD. The third scenario when ADH is increased. Now ADH stimulus for ADH secretion is when there is increase in tonicity of the blood. So increase in tonicity of the blood can occur due to a decreased blood volume. Okay, now decreased blood volume can be in two types. That is, one is true and one is pseudo. True meaning it is hypovolemic, true hypovolemic conditions. So any hypovolemic condition can cause. Now pseudo meaning the effective circulating volume is low. So these conditions such as congestive cardiac failure, nephrotic syndrome, or chronic liver disease, these are the conditions which can cause pseudo elevation in ADH, because the effective circulating volume is low. The body senses it as a hypovolemic state. As a result, ADH is secreted. In true, where there is total volume contraction, that is a stimulus for ADH secretion, resulting in increase in ADH. There is another condition where ADH is excess. That is, normally ADH is secreted when there is increase in the osmolality, serum osmolality. However, when ADH is secreted inappropriate to osmolality, that is when osmolality is low, ADH is secreted, it is called as SIADH. That is syndrome of inappropriate secretion of ADH. So normally ADH is secreted when osmolality increases about 290 osmoles per kg. Okay, but in SIADH what happens is that ADH may be secreted at 270 or 260 osmolality. That is, even when osmolality is low, ADH is secreted. This is called as SIADH. So, in general, hyponatremia is possible when both ADH and kidney is normal, that is in psychogenic polydipsia, and ADH is normal but kidney is abnormal, that is when in diuretics, patient is on diuretics or in CKD, or ADH excess due to decreased blood volume may be true or pseudo, that is in congestive cardiac failure, chronic liver disease or nephrotic syndrome, or inappropriate secretion of ADH inappropriate to osmolality, that is SIADH. So this is how hyponatremia occurs. Now, for diagnosis of hyponatremia, we'll consider all the three scenarios in which hyponatremia is possible. So, first scenario which we discussed is when ADH is normal and kidney is normal. This is when patient is taking excess of fluid, that is in psychogenic polydipsia. So, what happens in this is that patient keeps on consuming lots of fluid, as a result of which the serum osmolality, because there is lot of water, serum osmolality decreases. This is one thing. The other thing is because patient is consuming lot of water, where patient kidney, the blood reaching the kidney is also a lot, as a result of which the urine output which is produced is lot. When the urine has lot of water in it, the osmolality of urine reduces. So urinary osmolality will also reduce. So psychogenic polydipsia is not very important, not commonly seen, but the way to differentiate is that serum osmolality is low as well as urinary osmolality is low. This is psychogenic polydipsia. Otherwise, you can differentiate it by water deprivation test, but easy method is to differentiate by this. The second scenario which is possible is that where ADH secretion is normal, however kidney is abnormal. Now, if the patient is on diuretic, suppose patient is on thiazide diuretic, when patient is on thiazide diuretic, what happens is that thiazides act on sodium chloride channel which is present on the distal tubule. So when the sodium chloride channel is blocked, there is 10 to 20% of sodium which is to be reabsorbed from the distal tubule is excreted. As a result, the sodium load reaching CD increases. Okay, when the sodium load increasing, reaching the DCT increases, initially what it happens is that it will result in loss of sodium. But over a prolonged time, meaning 24 to 48 hours, what it does is that the rest of the nephron undergoes excess reabsorption, as a result of which, because so ADH is normal in this patient, ADH is normal, ADH acts, as a result excess water is reabsorbed. So excess water is reabsorbed by ADH, resulting in hyponatremia. However, loop diuretics, which act on sodium potassium to chloride channel, does not cause that much hyponatremia as compared to thiazide. This is because when loop diuretics are given, loop diuretics interfere with the medullary osmolality of the nephron. Okay, so once the medullary osmolality is interfered, ADH cannot act. ADH cannot act. When ADH cannot act, there is no excess water reabsorption, as a result of which loop diuretic does not cause that much hyponatremia as compared to thiazide diuretic. The second scenario is CKD. Suppose there is CKD, there is no that much sodium reabsorption, but water reabsorption can be there. Also, there is sodium loss in the urine. By that mechanism, it can cause hyponatremia. And the other mechanism is that retention of fluid, that is hypervolemic hyponatremia. It can cause due to dilutional hyponatremia. The third scenario which is possible is when there is excess of ADH. Excess of ADH is due to either stimulation of ADH by decreased blood volume, or there may be increased stimulation of the increased secretion of ADH inappropriate to the tonicity. Now, when ADH increases due to true decrease in the blood volume, that is called as hypovolemic hyponatremia. That means the patient is volume depleted. Now, the causes could be GI loss, that is vomiting, diarrhea, or renal loss due to diuretics, or AKI. Okay, then other causes are third space loss, okay, burns, and pancreatitis. So whenever there is true true hypovolemic hyponatremia, the total blood volume is low. As a result, the amount of blood reaching kidney is low. So once the amount of blood reaching kidney is low, what it does is that RAS is activated. Okay, RAS is renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system, as a result of which causes sodium retention. Okay, but because the total volume is low, there is hyponatremia. Once sodium and water retention happens, the amount of sodium which is excreted in the urine is low. Okay, so amount of sodium excreted in the urine is low. That means urinary sodium is less than 20 in this patient. So hypovolemic hyponatremia, the most important test to diagnose is decrease in urinary sodium. Because RAS is activated, the uric acid reabsorption increases, as a result of which uric acid in the body increases. This is another test to diagnose. These are the tests, but clinically hypovolemic hyponatremia is diagnosed by signs of dehydration. Basically, signs of dehydration such as sunken eyes, skin turgor low, skin pinch goes back very slowly. There is fall in orthostatic hypotension, decreased urine output. These are the signs of dehydration, which are also the signs of hypovolemic hyponatremia. And clinically, the test to diagnose is urinary sodium. Do urinary sodium? Urinary sodium is low. Most of the time, it is hypovolemic hyponatremia, except if the patient is on diuretics, where there is urinary loss. Other test is when uric acid is elevated along with urinary sodium low, means hypovolemic hyponatremia. Okay, the third scenario is ADH increased again, but there is decreased effective circulating volume. That means the patient has anasarca, however, the intravascular volume is low. This is seen in conditions such as congestive cardiac failure, nephrotic syndrome, or chronic liver disease. In this again the intravascular volume is low, but so intravascular volume is low, so urinary sodium is low. Okay, but patient has edema. So the method to diagnose hypervolemic hyponatremia is that patient has edema with urinary sodium low. So the causes could be congestive cardiac failure, nephrotic syndrome, or chronic liver disease. Now coming to the most important part, that is SIADH. In SIADH, ADH is high, but it is secreted inappropriate to the osmolality. There are 5 criteria which are there to diagnose SIADH. The most important criteria is decreased serum osmolality, increased urinary osmolality. Okay. Patient is euvolemic, that means the volume status is normal, and urinary sodium more than 20, and rule out adrenal, pituitary, and thyroid diseases. So SIDH is only diagnosed when serum osmolality is low, urinary osmolality is high, patient is euvolemic, urinary sodium is more than 20, and there is absence of adrenal, pituitary, or thyroid diseases. Now the method to diagnose SIDH is that, as I said, criteria urinary sodium is more than 20, usually more than 40. Second criteria is that the uric acid is really low in this patient, maybe 1 to 2. This is due to ANP secretion in SIDH patient. ANP results in decrease in uric acid. So method is the way to diagnose SIDH is euvolemic patient with increased urinary osmolality, high urinary sodium with decreased. So now through hyponatremia, once we clinically examine the patient, if the patient has signs of dehydration, we can label him as hypovolemic hyponatremia. If the patient is edematous, we can label him as hypervolemic. If the patient has nothing, that clinically normal appearing patient, then euvolemic. Now to confirm further, hypovolemic hyponatremia, you do urinary sodium, uric acid. Urinary sodium low, that is less than 20, uric acid increase. So hypovolemic hypo. In hypervolemic hyponatremia, urinary sodium is again low, uric acid is low, but edema is present. So this is clear-cut diagnosis because of edema. But in euvolemic hyponatremia, urinary sodium elevated, uric acid low, goes in favor of SIADH provided we rule out pituitary and thyroid diseases. So this is how we in general diagnose hyponatremia. The Harrison chart is quite complicated by certain useless conditions which are not frequently encountered. Now, how treatment of hyponatremia, we divide the patients into acute hyponatremia and chronic. Acute hyponatremia means hyponatremia which has developed within 48 hours. Chronic is more than 48 hours, or patients who are treated for acute hyponatremia when seen again after 48 hours. So acute hyponatremia, whether the patient has mild symptoms, moderate symptoms, or severe symptoms, or any type of hyponatremia, whether hypervolemic, hypovolemic, or euvolemic, the treatment is 3% NaCl, because patient can have cerebral herniation due to cerebral edema. That is why we use 3% NaCl in acute hyponatremia. So as per European Society of Critical Care, the 3% for acute hyponatremia, whenever we give 3% sodium chloride, the method of giving 3% 3% NaCl is not by calculating sodium requirement. It is directly giving 100 ml bolus over 10 minutes and repeating it after 10 minutes 3 times. So total patient will receive 300 ml of 3% NaCl, which will cause a change in sodium by 4 to 6. This is the method to treat acute hyponatremia as per European Society of Critical Care. Whether it is followed or not in GMC, it's another thing to discuss. Now, chronic hyponatremia. Chronic hyponatremia is when patient presents after 48 hours, or when patient is acutely treated for hyponatremia and then reviewed after 48 hours. Now, if the patient has severe symptoms, that is, if the patient has seizure or impending cerebral herniation, then again treat like acute hyponatremia. That is, give 3% NaCl 100 ml boluses 3 times. Now, if the patient has mild to moderate symptoms, that is without any seizures or patient is completely stuporous, that is GCS is 3/15. If patient has mild to moderate but serum sodium is more than 123 millicoulomb per 120 millicoulomb per liter, then no 3%. Okay, if patient has mild to moderate, but again serum sodium is less than 120, then 3% NaCl. This is the treatment. Now, how to give 3% NaCl? The correction what we do is generally 6 to 8 millicoulomb per day. Okay, because more than 10 per day can cause osmotic demyelination. For this, we have to calculate sodium requirement. Now, sodium requirement for any particular patient is given by 0.6 into body weight into change of sodium. Now, change of sodium what we require is 6 or 8. So, suppose if a patient is a 60 kg and change of sodium what we require is 6. So 6 into 60 kg into 0.6, which is equal to 216. So his sodium requirement will become 260. Okay, so 1 pint, which is equal to 100 ml, 3% NaCl is equal to 51.3 millicoulombs of sodium. Okay, the concentration what is written is that 1 liter of 3% NaCl contains 513. So 100 ml of 3% NaCl will contain 51 millicoulombs per liter. So our target is 216 millicoulombs per day. So 1 pint will give just 51. So we will require at least 4.5 pints of 3% NaCl over 24 hours. Roughly about 420 ml is required. So 420 ml is required. That means about 4.5 bottles. So we can either give 100 ml every 4 to 5 hours or 15 to 30 ml per hour is the rate of correction. This is for chronic uh, hyponatremia with serum sodium less than 120. Now, if the patient has chronic hyponatremia, but it is serum sodium is more than 120 and patient has SIADH. Now, the treatment for SIADH is fluid restriction. Strict fluid restriction, there are formulas to calculate how much fluid restriction, but fluid restriction is the basic first line of treatment for SIADH and not VAPTANs. Fluid restriction, that is restrict the fluid to 1 liter or sometimes up to 700 ml per day, and patient could be treated. There are other modalities of treatment such as giving urea tablets, which are generally not available, 30 to 60 gram per day, or there is one more method to give salt capsules with diuretic, but this is avoided. Last method to treat is Vaptan, that is tolvaptan. We can give, start with 15 milligram OD, then increase to 30 milligram. Sometimes treatment of SIDH may take 3 months also. Now, if patient has hypovolemia, true hypovolemia, and mild symptoms, then you can use 0.45% and 0.9% NS for treatment. So this is how you treat